Hello everyone and welcome to another warrior guide for Shadowlands raiding. This time around we will be focusing on the arms warrior and everything that you need to know to be an effective and efficient raider in this expansion. Arms warriors are known to be a heavy hitting class with a slow, easy to play rotation. The main focus when DPSing as arms is to pool rage and save your hard-hitting abilities for when the Colossus Smash debuff is up on your target. They are a very versatile class that can choose from their various talents to match any given fight style, whether that be single target, cleave, or large AoE fights. Let's get right into the strengths and weaknesses of the class. To start, Arms has a very flexible toolkit of abilities and talents to choose from to match the style of fight that you are currently progressing on. They have a very strong cleave with sweeping strikes and the cleave talent, and very strong burst ability with Colossus Smash paired with Execute, which is an exceptional amount of damage when paired with the Venthyr Covenant. Warriors are one of the most mobile classes in the game, with Charge, Intervene, and Heroic Leap at their disposal to get them out of harm's way, and then right back into the fight with a very minimal DPS loss in between. They have a very strong defensive toolkit, which includes Die by the Sword, which completely mitigates physical damage, Ignore Pain, which cuts damage taken in half, Spell Reflection, which can completely mitigate some hard-hitting spell casts, and a raid-wide temporary health boost with a Rallying Cry. And last but certainly not least, Warriors are the only class that brings the attack power buff, Battle Shout. A few of the weaknesses of arms are, well, it can feel pretty bland and boring and extremely slow, especially outside of the execute phase, where most of your time is spent sitting around waiting for rage to pool for your Colossus Smash debuff period. Also, besides execute, arms lacks any powerful feeling single target casts. You kinda just go through the rotation with nothing exciting happening. We also mentioned earlier about how versatile the spec is with all of their talent choices, but several of those powerful choices are lined up on the same talent row, forcing you to choose only one depending on the fight style. Arms is a very basic and easy to play spec with a focus on resource management. That resource being your rage. With most of the abilities used being rage spenders, there are very few actual rage generators besides your white swings or auto attacks. These can be slow, seeing as you are using a two-handed weapon, and this is how the very slow playstyle came to be. It is a balance between not spending rage too quickly and being rage starved for Colossus Smash, while also keeping rage low enough for moments when Bladestorm or Ravager are available, so you don't rage cap during these casts. The rotation has a high amount of downtime, and a lot of your time will be spent waiting for rage to build. Seeing as you want to use Mortal Strike on cooldown, which is a rage spender, you simply find yourself not wanting to cast the lighter hitting abilities, such as Slam or Whirlwind, to fill in the downtime, so that way you will have enough rage for when your Mortal Strike is actually available again. You also want to have nearly a full rage bar every time Colossus Smash is up, as it is a pretty healthy damage buff. If you are a total beginner to this spec, I suggest reading the Arms Warrior Quick Guide on Icy Veins, which is where I am getting most of the info for this video. I'll post the link below. Here I will list a few of the many add-ons and macros that can specifically help you play your Arms Warrior better. This is absolutely not an all-inclusive list, and I strongly encourage you to check out some third-party websites for more macros and add-ons relative to general gameplay in World of Warcraft. Feel free to pause the video and write the macros down as you watch. And first off, this macro will display the appropriate tooltip and cast either Whirlwind if you have Fervor of Battle talented, or Slam if it is not, allowing you to use the same keybind as you switch in between talents. This macro here will display the appropriate tooltip and cast either Avatar or Deadly Calm, depending on which is talented, allowing you to use the same keybind as you switch between the two talents. If neither are talented, it will display an unused icon. One of the most important and useful macros that you can have in your arsenal is this Cancel Bladestorm macro. Normally, once you start bladestorming, you are stuck in the animation until it finishes, which can prevent you from doing other things such as interrupting a spellcast or leaping out of danger. This macro allows you to cancel Bladestorm early by simply casting Bladestorm again while spinning, especially useful when using the Signet legendary ring that can randomly proc Bladestorm at any time. This macro will cast Heroic Leap wherever your mouse cursor is located, simply bypassing the extra step of clicking it again when the circle appears. This macro here allows you to use the same key to cancel Bladestorm and charge out of it. Very useful in times when you need to immediately switch to a target outside of melee range. Another very important macro, this will use any off cooldown racial abilities as well as any on-use trinkets equipped alongside Colossus Smash. This will be your basic burst cooldown. Oftentimes as melee you will find that you are assigned to an interrupt rotation and at times on a target other than the main target. This macro will cast Pummel against your focus target if you have one, or your current target if you do not, allowing you to keep DPS on your current target while interrupting your focus. Now we'll take a look at some add-ons, and although there aren't many add-ons specifically designed just for Arms Warriors, I'll give you a few general add-ons that some of you may not be familiar with. First up is Rayleigh's Spell Announcer. This add-on sends announcements to the channel of your choosing when you cast certain spells or when certain spells end. I personally use it to announce when my rallying cry starts and when it ends and the extra health wears off, so that my healers know to expect that health loss. Then we have Tell Me When. Tell Me When is an add-on that allows you to track many of your cooldowns, buffs, debuffs, and procs. Very useful to notify you when powerful abilities are available again. And then one I'm sure many people are familiar with, but some may not be. GTFO is a very simple but mandatory add-on that has a god-awful screech when you are standing in something you shouldn't be. Comes in handy this expansion as many effects are very difficult to see. And now we'll go over the importance of the stats as an Arms Warrior and the order you should prioritize them in. As with all specs, Strength is above and beyond your best stat on gear. It provides attack power, which contributes directly to damage dealt on all abilities. Haste compresses your rotation, reducing the time between swings, lowering the cooldown of your abilities, and increasing the speed at which your dots damage your target. Haste, up to 20%, is your best secondary stat at this point. After you reach 20%, you should no longer stack Haste, as diminishing returns make it pretty much useless. Critical Strike doubles the damage of attacks, and increases the rage generated by white swings by 30%, which makes this your third best stat in this rage heavy spec. Mastery simply increases the damage taken debuff from deep wounds, which is not nearly as important as the above stats. And Versatility gives a flat increase to damage dealt and reduces damage taken. Any other stat should be chosen over this. Next up, we will be going over Covenants and Soulbinds. Now, your Covenant choice in Shadowlands is a very important choice and is not necessarily an easy thing to change, so you want to be sure that you make the right choice for the content that you plan on running. There is no one Covenant that is best for all content, but there are some that are better than others depending on what you are playing. First up, we have Venthyr. Venthyr have the best single target damage output, around 8% above all other Covenants, making it the best choice for most players who want to focus on raiding. It does slightly fall behind other Covenants when it comes to AoE damage, but most raiding encounters, even those with many adds, come down to single target damage on a boss in the end. Therefore, raiding players should choose Venthyr for its Condemn ability. Now with the carry and lack in single target DPS, they more than make up for in AoE, making it very well suited for Mythic Plus players. Night Fae is also very competitive in Mythic Plus, and would be stronger than Kyrian if it wasn't for their ground effect being stationary. When it comes to Mythic Plus, either one of these choices should suffice. And last but not least, we have a Necrolord. The Necrolord is pretty far behind in every situation, being as its ability is designed as a group buff rather than a solo buff. It's a stationary buff, it's on a very long cooldown, and the 3 other players affected by it may not even need the extra crit. It might not be a stat they value. I recommend staying away from this choice in any situation. Now we'll get a bit into Conduits, and Conduits are items that can enhance your abilities or playstyle by attaching them to a Soulbind tree. They are organized into 3 different types, being Potency, Finesse, and Endurance. Here is a brief overview of the best performing conduits of each type. Now, Potency conduits are your strongest conduits as they directly affect your DPS output. The best current Potency conduits are Crash the Ramparts if you're spec'd into Dreadnought. It's very strong as it buffs your overpower by 8%. Also, the 3 separate Covenant Potency conduits are very strong in their own right, with those being Ashen Juggernaut for Venthyr, Piercing Verdict for Kyrian, and Destructive Reverberations for Night Fae. Endurance conduits are geared towards survival and defensive options. There are 2 main choices here, with most people going with Stalwart Guardian, which reduces the powerful defensive ability Die by the Sword by 20 seconds, and Fueled by Violence, which passively heals you for a percentage of your deep wounds damage, which should always be up on your target anyway. Finesse conduits are utility conduits, and there isn't a ton of choice here. Inspiring Presence is the go-to, with Safeguard running a close second in certain situations. Just be sure that if you use Safeguard on a tank, be sure he has a way to cancel the effect of you taking the hit for him, or you will most likely die on boss fights. Now we'll get a little bit into the Soulbinds, and for Venthyr, Nagia the Mistblade will be your primary choice, as the haste bonus that comes with Thrillseeker is helpful if procced at the right time. Theotar the Mad Duke actually would not be too bad if it wasn't for the AoE of Soothing Shade being immobile. And General Draven is not recommended at this time, as he brings with him no damage dealing bonuses. When it comes to Kyrian, Pelagos is far and away the strongest at this time. Combat Meditation is very strong if you can keep up with the Sorrowful Memories. Clea will not be competitive until the full tree is unlocked, which is still weeks away at the time of this video. And Mykonikos is just mediocre when compared to the other 2. With Night Fae, you'll want to go with Nia in most situations, as Grove Invigoration gives you a strong stacking mastery buff. Karain is also competitive and has a slight advantage in multi-target situations, such as Mythic Plus. Dreamweaver is simply not a DPS tree, and I would avoid it. Even though Pod Tender does have situational uses, I believe that an Arms Warrior should always take DPS over survivability. And finally, if you did decide to go with the Necrolords, I would recommend Emeni or Hirmir, as they can both be just as effective as the other. Do not take Marilith, as she is by far the worst as far as DPS potential. Now we're going to go over the talents, and it's important to know that especially in this expansion, your talent choices change constantly depending on many variables, whether you're doing Mythic Plus, whether you're raiding. If you're raiding, whether you're fighting a single target boss, an AoE heavy boss, a cleave style boss, there's a ton of different talent choices. The ones I'm going to give you here are just a very basic overview that will get you by on most fights. I would highly recommend checking out websites such as Icy Veins, Wowhead, and any sort of utility website that can help you on a boss by boss basis, help you pick your talents, because frankly it is going to change usually depending on which boss you're fighting, whether you're PvPing, whether you're doing Mythic Plus. So this is not an end all be all, this is just a basic guide to select talents as an Arms Warrior. Most likely in the rating sense, Mythic Plus is going to be quite different from this, so you might want to check that out on your own if that's what you're planning on doing here. But anyways, here we go. So these talents here would just be your basic recommended talents for most single target boss encounters, and I'll do my best to break them down by tier as we go. So in Tier 1, you have War Machine, Sudden Death, or Skull Splitter, excuse me. So War Machine causes your auto attacks to generate 10% more rage with each swing. Additionally, movement speed is increased by 30% for 8 seconds, and 10 rage is generated every time an enemy is killed. So War Machine's value depends on the frequency of add deaths, so in general you need roughly 1 kill every 8 seconds to keep up with the rage from Skull Splitter in sustained combat, making it more suitable for open world and dungeon content where you can quickly chain kills. Unlike Victory Rush, it does not require getting the killing blow yourself, only damaging the target within 2 seconds of its death. Then we have Sudden Death, which causes your attacks to have a chance to allow Execute to be used on targets above 20% health and be free of rage cost. Still deals damage as if spent with 40 rage. Sudden Death adds a proc-based gameplay and is exceptional when paired with Condemn, since you can also use that over 80% from the Venthyr Covenant. The procs do not trigger Tactician, but they will generate rage if the target survives. Then finally, in this first tier, we have Skull Splitter. Skull Splitter grants an additional activated ability which deals moderate damage and generates 20 rage on a 21-second hasted cooldown. Now, Skull Splitter is the best talent for sustaining the rotation and filling global cooldowns, as it gives you rage when you actually need it. Although it can hit your second target with sweeping strikes, it will not generate extra rage. I, for one, usually stick with Sudden Death, but if you find that this rotation is just too slow for your liking and there's really not much to do, especially outside of Execute, you can go ahead with Skull Splitter. It'll give you another button to press, and it is a pretty good damage-dealing, rage-generating attack. Then right below that we have the Tier 2 talents, and these talents provide additional control and mobility options. So Double Time adds a second use of charge and reduces its cooldown from 20 to 17 seconds. Double Time is usually the go-to choice for both extra mobility to move around faster, and it gives you rage when you charge, so it's good to have 2 of those in your pocket. Impending Victory replaces Victory Rush with a new ability which spends 10 rage to heal 30% of your health on a 30-second cooldown. Getting a killing blow will reset its cooldown. Now, it is very useful in situations which require in-combat healing, given that arms lack self-healing outside of talents and things like that. The damage is surprisingly good, although it's not enough to outweigh using charge more frequently, so I would not recommend using Impending Victory at this time. Then we have Stormbolt. Stormbolt grants an active ability with a 20-yard range, which deals very low damage, but also stuns. This can be very strong in Mythic Plus. As most of you probably already know, it stuns most mobs in a Mythic Plus dungeon, which can be very helpful. It's really our only form of CC besides Fear, which you don't want to be doing too much in Mythic Plus. But it's not exceptionally useful at all, really, in raids, especially this raid tier. There's no adds that really need to be stunned. They can all be cleaved down pretty efficiently. So here, I usually go with Double Time in this tier. Then Tier 3 are some pretty strong talents here. They pretty much allow you to customize your rotation a little bit. They're all fairly strong. We have Massacre, which allows Execute to be used on targets below 35% health instead of 20. It's extremely potent when you pair it with Condemn. That pretty much gives you 55% of a boss's health in total, where you'll be able to use Condemn. So that is very strong for the Venthyr Covenant. It loses value with the other covenants, but it's not a bad talent at all. Next we have Fervor of Battle, that causes your Whirlwind to cast a free slam against your primary target. It pretty much replaces Slam with Whirlwind as far as your rotation goes. It fills less global cooldowns due to the higher rage cost, but dealing more damage with each use. The automatic Slam does not cost rage, and it doesn't trigger Tactician, but it will hit your second target if you're using sweeping strikes. Now Rend is pretty much a debuff that you want to keep up consistently. It's a dot. It can be applied to 2 targets at the same time if you use it with sweeping strikes, and it can be refreshed early to increase the duration of the new debuff by up to 30%. So you can overlap it by refreshing it and not lose damage, as long as it's still 30% of the original Rend left on the target. So it's very strong in a single target fight. It's a bit troublesome to maintain sometimes. You might need a weak aura to show you when it actually drops off. It can be tough to see on the debuff bar, but it is certainly a very strong on longer single target fights. I, for one, stick with Massacre on almost every fight just because I am Venthyr. But if you went with another Covenant, you might want to consider using Rend just to keep that extra dot damage going, especially at times where you're not able to attack the boss. And now we have the tier 4 level 35 talents, and Second Wind is the first one here. It causes you to restore 6% of your maximum health every second when you have not taken damage for 5 seconds. It's typically not used in group content just because you're almost always taking some form of damage, but a surprising number of damage effects during boss encounters will not interrupt the heal. It's great in open world content, allowing you to quickly heal up between combat. After that, we do have Bounding Stride. Bounding Stride grants 70% movement speed for 3 seconds after you use Heroic Leap, reduces its cooldown by 15 seconds. It's useful in general gameplay. There are certain raid bosses where this is actually very strong. It lines up your Heroic Leap timer very well with some abilities that you need to get out of. But other than that, we'd probably just recommend Defensive Stance. It just provides on-demand damage mitigation. It does lower your damage, but there are times where you need to take less damage, and you can use Defensive Stance to do that. So for most fights, we'd recommend D-Stance. For very few fights, there are a couple. Artificer is one that comes to mind, where Bounding Stride does come in handy on a situational basis. Then we have Tier 5, which are pretty much AoE enhancing abilities. We have Collateral Damage, which causes Whirlwind to deal 25% increased damage for each ability cleaved onto a second target during sweeping strikes. It's kind of a strange ability. It's difficult to find a case to use this, but it mainly resides within a 2-target niche. Sort of Huntsman Altador, I guess, comes to mind when you're constantly dealing damage to 2 targets. The follow-up Whirlwind can be buffed considerably and even strike multiple targets for additional damage, although you're more likely to use one or the other abilities in situations with more than 2 targets. It's just not strong enough when there's more than 2. After that, we have Warbreaker. This replaces Colossus Smash with an AoE version of basically Colossus Smash, which affects all the targets around you. It synergizes very well with Blade Storm for burst AoE and applies deep wounds, making it easier to benefit from the debuff when facing multiple targets. So Warbreaker is very strong in AoE fights. You can drop your Warbreaker. It hits pretty much every target around you. I think it's within 8 yards. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head, but it also applies a dot to those targets in deep wounds. So very, very strong for AoE situations. Then we have just Basic Cleave, which used to be in our back pocket, used to be a regular old ability, very strong, but they decided to make it a choice now, and a choice with other stronger abilities, which I totally disagree with. But anyways, Cleave does have the highest sustained multi-target damage potential, while also maintaining deep wounds, making it the talent of choice when frequently facing multiple targets. Extremely strong in Mythic Plus, as Cleave is every target that it does hit, it refreshes deep wounds on it, so you don't have to tab target and do a bunch of stuff here to keep your deep wounds dots up. So that's very, very strong for either Mythic Plus or boss fights and raids that have three targets up at a consistent time. Sort of general Draken type of fight and things like that. Then here in Tier 6, we have In for the Kill as the first. This causes Colossus Smash to give you 10% haste for 8 seconds when you cast it. It increases the number of global cooldowns, auto attack swings, and rage generated during Colossus Smash, so it does combine well with Anger Management to give you some higher uptime on that, as it reduces the cooldown on Colossus Smash, obviously giving you more haste every time you use it. Then we have Avatar, which is an active ability. 90-second cooldown causes you to get some rage, 20 rage. You deal 20% increased damage for 20 seconds. So it's 20-20-20. And it removes all roots and snares, which is very, very strong in PvP. And also in Mythic Plus and raiding, as you can often be caught there. That's not the main thing you'll use it for. It's pretty much part of your burst cooldown. So you'll combine Avatar with things like Warbreaker and Blade Storm, and you do a tremendous amount of damage in a short period of time. It's very, very, very strong. And if you're using the Signet of Tormented Kings, which you probably should be, you almost have to take Avatar. It's activated every time you use either Ravager or Blade Storm. giving you a 20% damage buff almost every time you use those other abilities. So very, very, very strong when paired with the Signet of Tormented Kings legendary. Then we have Deadly Calm, which is another active ability with a 60-second cooldown. Passively increases your maximum rage by 30, and it makes your next 4 abilities with a rage cost free. So it creates, what it does is it creates small burst windows, and it's very strong with Condemn from Venthyr, as you can get your next 4 Condemns to not cost you any rage whatsoever, and while still building rage with your auto attacks. The increased rage cap really doesn't do much. I mean, as arms, you really don't or shouldn't be ever at the top of your rage bar. You should never really be worried about capping that you need the extra 30 rage, but regardless, it does help you out, I guess, in a small way. But usually you want to take Avatar here. I know I do. I have the Signet, and it's extremely potent when combined with that Signet. Then at the bottom end, tier 7 talents here, we have Anger Management, which reduces the cooldown of Colossus Smash and Bladestorm by a second for every 20 rage spent. It reduces the cooldown of Colossus Smash by probably about 30 seconds total, and Bladestorm by almost a minute depending on rage generation and haste, making it really good for lining up burst AoE. It's not the best for sustained single target damage, but as far as Mythic Plus goes, Anger Management, if used correctly, can be extremely strong, especially if you have a group that continuously pulls smaller sized groups. Next to that, we have Dreadnought. That adds a second charge to Overpower, causes it to unleash a damaging wave, so it pretty much gives it an AoE effect, cone effect in front of it. It allows for the smoother use of Overpower, gives you a second charge which reduces the likelihood of wasting Tactician procs, while the Shockwave does add some multi-target damage. It's not great damage, but it's also not horrible damage as well. It's very strong in all types of content. You can use it as a one-size-fits-all for Mythic Plus for raiding and things like that. If you combine it with Sweeping Strikes, it actually doubles the Shockwave, so it hits all the enemies in front of you twice for every time you use Overpower. So that can be very strong in pretty much all type of situations. Then next to that, we have Ravager. Ravager replaces Bladestorm with a stationary effect. It does follow you around, albeit very slowly. It doesn't keep up too well, but it deals damage, and it does inflict deep wounds over 12 seconds and generates 7 rage per hit. So it is a very good rage gaining ability. And if you look at it by itself, it might seem pretty weak due to the fact that it's semi-stationary. It does move, it does follow you, but it follows you very slowly, often not fast enough. But when you combine this with your Signet of Tormented Kings again, that legendary ring, because of the short cooldown of Ravager, you can apply Ravager more and have a higher chance of Avatar being procced by Ravager. So it is very, very strong when paired with the Signet. So most people who do use that legendary, which we'll get into next here, but most people do use that legendary, they go with Ravager and Avatar, because the two of them combined just make it very, very more potent burst windows on a shorter cooldown. So I usually go with Ravager here, but Dreadnought is not in any way a bad choice. And finally, we will go ahead and show you the rotation that you want to be using for a single target and a multi-target as an arms warrior. Once again, this rotation is not static. You want to change your rotation based on the situation, but this is just the basic rotation you want to use. Now, if you are not using Signet of Tormented Kings, which is the legendary ring, you want to start with your Avatar and your Ravager before your Colossus Smash. If you are using that Signet, which most people probably are, the first thing you want to do is put your Ravager down. What this is going to do is give you a chance to proc Avatar for free on its own, and also Ravager is going to put deep wounds on up to 8 targets. So you do want to start with Ravager before you hit Colossus Smash. If your Avatar does not proc off that first Ravager, then you want to wait, I think it's 4 or 5 seconds before you cast Avatar, because the Signet has an internal cooldown that will not allow you to proc it within that time frame. So if you don't proc Avatar right off that first Ravager, count to 4 or 5, then hit Avatar, and it could even give you a second Ravager, but do this all before your Colossus Smash. After Colossus Smash or Warbreaker, you want to hit your Execute with any sudden death procs. If you're Venthyr, you want to your execute will be your primary attack, but all the way until they get below 80% health. After that, your next priority would be overpower. What that's going to do is buff your mortal strike by 20%. Then obviously after your overpower, you hit your mortal strike. Your mortal strike is what keeps your deep wounds going, so you want to do that pretty much on cooldown to always keep deep wounds up on a target. You want to cast Blade Storm if you're not using Ravager, and you want to do that during Colossus Smash every time you use it. Then you have Slam or Whirlwind in AoE situations, but for single target it is your Slam that will be your filler ability here. So now this is going to be what we call the execute phase. For Venthyr it is above 80% and below 20%, or below 35% if you're talented into it. For any other faction it is simply below 20% or 35% if you took the talent. But what you want to do during the execute phase is Avatar is going to be your primary go-to. You want to cast that right before Colossus Smash. You want to cast Ravager immediately prior to Colossus Smash, also the same as you would outside of the execute phase if you're using the Signet. You want to cast your Mortal Strike as needed to keep your deep wounds up. Overpower is basically just your filler here, but execute is going to be your spam cast. Every time execute is available, you want to cast it, and it's going to be quite often during this phase. It's very spammy, but just, you know, don't forget to cast the Mortal Strike to keep the deep wounds up. So pretty much it's Avatar on cooldown, Ravager on cooldown, Colossus Smash on cooldown. You want to cast your execute, just spam it as often as you can, and cast Mortal Strike only when needed to keep the deep wounds bleed going. Other than that, just go all out execute spam during this phase. And finally, we'll go over the rotation for multi-target fights. So when you are fighting multiple targets, sweeping strikes is only to be used if you're not about to Blade Storm. Otherwise, if you do have Blade Storm available, you want to start with your Colossus Smash. You want to Blade Storm during Colossus Smash every time you use it. Cleave is what is going to be used to maintain your deep wounds on up to 5 targets, so Cleave is going to be your primary attack when fighting pretty much 2 to 5 targets. Then you want to cast Execute, Overpower, Mortal Strike, and Whirlwind in that order as your fillers. And if you're on 4 or more targets, which is pretty much just Mythic Plus, if there's just targets all over the place, it's basically the same, only you want to use Whirlwind during Colossus Smash when your Blade Storm is on cooldown. And that will do it there for your multiple target. It's pretty simple and self-explanatory here. And I almost forgot to put the Legendaries in here. This is quite the long video. Did not expect it to go this long, but thankfully this is a pretty, well, fairly short list. Most legendary items here have passive bonuses that do not need to be managed. There are a few that can be optimized to improve your performance slightly, but when using the Signet of Tormented Kings, which is the recommended legendary, at least on my part, you want to make sure your cooldowns of Avatar and Blade Storm or Ravager are desynced enough to not waste potential procs. When using Judgment of the Arbiter, which is tougher to use it because you need someone else to really make it effective using the same legendary. If you do have someone wearing that same legendary, the AoE projectile will bounce between the Judgment wearing players, so proper positioning is key to ensure that the wave of damage actually hits the targets you're in combat with. So most effectively, if you had a tank that was using this and you were standing on the other side of the boss, then it would be more effective. Other than that, it is not a very useful legendary whatsoever. So this has been quite the lengthy video. If you did stick around, I thank you kindly, and hopefully this will help you perform better as an arms warrior, or maybe learn something that you did not quite know before you watch this video. Now, as always, like and subscribe. It absolutely, definitely, totally helps us out here. Well, helps me out. There is no us. But every like and comment I get, you know, perhaps takes the video and gets it recommended to someone else. So much appreciated. There will be more guides coming in the future. I hope to start making guides for other classes as well. Been pretty focused on my warrior this expansion, but we'll see how that goes. So thank you very much and have a great night.